For 7 hours, the Marine sniper team waited, crouching behind a concrete block in a dusty courtyard at the edge of an adobe compound in Afghanistan. They were pretty sure a group of local Taliban fighters were on the other side of the compound wall, but the snipers couldn't strike until they had more proof. So they stayed there, in silence. They downed energy drinks to stay awake. They urinated in bottles and defecated in bags so they wouldn't leave evidence of their presence behind. Team leader Sergeant Eric Rue kept himself sharp by running scenarios in his head of what could happen next. What if the Taliban burst in guns blazing? What if they entered unarmed? What if there are children in the way? What if the courtyard is suddenly overrun by enemy fighters? Where do we go? U.S. Marines and Taliban fighters have battled in the villages and compounds of this farming community nearly every day for 8 weeks straight. It became one of the epicenters of America's war effort in Afghanistan. But during most of those shootouts, the two sides had been hundreds or even thousands of feet apart. But on this day, they fought at point-blank range. But despite all those hours of what-ifs playing in his head, Rue and his team couldn't have predicted how this gunfight would play out. Thank you guys so much for checking out this video. I hope you enjoy it. If you do enjoy it, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It helps me out a lot, and I really appreciate it. But if you, for any reason at all, don't enjoy this video, feel free to hit that dislike button, and make sure you guys leave me a comment down below letting me know what I can do to improve my future videos. Any and all feedback is greatly appreciated here. Also, if you guys are interested in supporting the channel and helping me continue to make these videos better, the best way to do that is through our Patreon. I have the Patreon account linked down in the description below. Huge thank you to all of my Patreon supporters. You guys make all these videos possible. But thank you guys again for checking out this video. Let's continue. After waiting for so long, the sniper team decided to try something new to flush out their targets. The team leader, Sergeant Rue, whispered into his radio to headquarters, requesting for some helicopters to make a low pass flying overhead, in hopes that the enemy fighters on the other side of the compound wall might start shooting at the helos, giving the sniper team the proof they needed to engage the enemy. Thankfully, there were already 2 helicopters not far away, circling over another group of Marines engaged in a firefight. So those 2 helicopters quickly made their way to their position and made the low pass right over the top of them. But the men on the other side of the wall didn't take the bait. If they had guns, they didn't bother shooting them at the Cobra gunship and the Huey attack chopper. Staff Sergeant Doug Webb was getting sick of waiting. He wanted to figure out if these guys were Taliban or not right now. He scooted his way into a small room adjacent to the courtyard. On the western wall of the room at floor level was a yard-wide mouse hole. So he laid down on his chest and put his face right up against the hole. At first, all he could see were ankles and feet, and he could hear 4 male voices speaking another language. But then he recognized a single word: Taliban, and he was able to get an angle where he could see one of the men had a vest packed with ammunition and was carrying an AK-47. So Webb, now very excited, rushed back into the room where his fellow Marines were and almost got himself shot. He surprised his teammate Sergeant Nick Worth, who drew a pistol on him, but quickly recognized his friend and reholstered his gun. Staff Sergeant Webb quickly informed his fellow Marines that he was able to see the men on the other side of the wall, and they were definitely armed, and they appeared to be walking away from the snipers on a north-south trail at the compound's edge. So if they were going to attack, they needed to do it right away. The team leader, Sergeant Rue, decided to give them the go-ahead on attacking the enemy. So he sent 3 snipers to the roof and then ran out of the courtyard with 3 others. They entered an east-west alleyway perpendicular to the trail that Webb had spied through his mouse hole. They quickly reached the intersection and saw one man in the distance to their left. Luckily, he didn't see them in the alleyway. Then, a second man wearing a brown tunic and a black hat turned the corner. He He was maybe 5 feet away from the snipers. His eyes widened with surprise. The man quickly swung an AK-47 from behind his back, but before he was able to get it up, one of the Marine snipers carrying a Benelli shotgun dumped 4 rounds of buckshot into the man's chest, and he crumbled to the ground. A third man in a white robe appeared about 150 feet to the north and started firing an AK-47 at the snipers, but one of the Marines quickly dropped to one knee and shot 4 rounds from his M4, eliminating the enemy fighter. Then almost immediately a barrage of bullets came flying in directly at the snipers from the cornfields in the west, as well as from the trees to the east. Clearly, there were more than 4 enemy fighters in the area. Many, many more. And some of them could shoot. One of the snipers positioned on the roof had an M203 grenade launcher, but it was blasted out of his hand by one of the enemy fighters. The Marine next to him took a shot in the center of his chest. It spun him around, and he collapsed on his forearms. Thankfully, the plates in his plate carrier caught the round, saving his life. It was another now or never point for the Marines. The fire from the enemy was about to separate the sniper groups from one another and make them much easier to pick off. So the team leader, Sergeant Rue, pulled the team back to the courtyard where they took up guarding positions at the entrances. The whole team took a moment to look at the Marine who had been shot at the chest and wondered how the heck he was still alive. The snipers knew he wasn't the only lucky one. The storm of lead from the cornfield could have easily killed any of them. The gunshots thankfully died down for a minute. Rue's mind turned to those 2 Taliban bodies outside on the trail. American forces could really benefit from the valuable information on their bodies. Their weapons, documents, radios, even fingerprints. But the Taliban were famous for removing their dead almost instantly. Once again, the Marines were faced with a now or never moment. So Rue and Webb went out to get the bodies. The Marines grabbed the first dead soldier by the ankles and dragged him back into the courtyard. He had his AK still slung across his chest and a rice bag filled with ammunition. Again, the Marines took fire from at least 2 different positions in the corn. But again, the fire died down, and it was time for them to make a run for the second body. They hurled themselves into the alleyway and made a right on the trail. Ordinarily, Marines here have avoided these obvious footpaths. Local fighters have turned the trails into death traps filled with improvised explosive devices, or IEDs. But there was no time to cut through the fields. As they moved, Webb noticed a purple sack, and he thought to himself, that's probably a bomb. And then it exploded. A thunderous boom rang out, and a cloud of dirt engulfed the snipers. Both of the men were thrown back onto their backs, but thankfully they were unharmed. They were able to quickly get back on their feet and fall back to the courtyard. Not long after, a handful of infantrymen from a Marine platoon wandered into the compound. They were later joined by the rest of their squad and a second unit from nearby Echo Company. The firefight continued, but now it was the Taliban who were outgunned. The Cobra and Huey gunships returned, blasting thousands of rounds into the tree lines and buildings that the fighters were using as firing positions. That allowed the sniper team a chance to exit the battle nearly 12 hours after they had first slipped into that courtyard. Scampering along the side of a canal, they walked out the same way they entered, in silence. Echo Company and the Taliban fighters continued to battle it out around those compounds more than 36 hours after the sniper team's initial attack. But the conflict had returned to its normal routine, with 2 sides firing at each other from hundreds of yards away, not up close. The sniper team was temporarily confined to their base to give them time to recover from that insane gunfight. With that, guys, that is the end of today's video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I hope you guys will have a fantastic rest of your day, and I will see you all in the next video.